So, welcome to the fundamentals of Bernina Designer software. And I'm Shannon Strain, and it's my pleasure to not only present this video, but also the fabulous clubs that we have here at Steve Soenvac in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, related to embroidery software. And one of the clubs that meets once a month, generally on a Wednesday from 1:30 to 4 or 6 to 8:30, is the Bernina Designer Software Club. We have the pleasure of having the webinars produced by Debbie Lashbrook from Bernina International, and she does a great job in giving us several different topics to look at throughout the year. There's 10 sessions per year, and the purpose of this video is just to give not only the newcomers to the software, but may I also venture to say those of us that have been using the software for a while, just a better grounding, a better foundation of the fundamentals of the software. And by doing so, I do feel that you're going to get more out of each of the club sessions. As I've mentioned in the past, and I'll say it again, it's very important that after club, do by all means print up the PDF copies of the lessons that Bernina provides for us, as well as anything that I might provide for you, and work through the lesson in the weeks before and after club. It just gets you more versed in the software. Just like a musical instrument, the more you play it, the better you get. Now, before I actually start talking about and orienting us to the user interface, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping as far as design formats and where they are stored on our computer. And so to do that, I'm just going to bring up this little slide that I made. And what I want to talk about is where the designs that come with your Bernina Designer software are installed, and it really does depend. It really does depend on which operating system you are currently using. So up in the green lettering here, we have, for those of us that are on the Windows 7 platform, you're going to find your Bernina designs in the Libraries folder under Embroidery, Public Embroidery, and then Bernina 8 Embroidery. Those of us that have either Windows 8 or 10 computers, soon we're going to have Creator coming up, which maybe that's 10.1, or maybe it's Windows 11, who knows. It may be in a different location, but at least for now, at the recording of this video, Windows 8 and 10 users, you're going to find your embroidery designs in your hard drive. It's generally the C drive, but instead of Libraries, you're going to look up under Users, Public Embroidery, Bernina 8 Embroidery. And you might want to pause the video at this point just to write down the information that's pertinent to you. If you have the pleasure of sewing on a Bernina 5 series, 7 series, or the fabulous Bernina 880, you're going to be using a design format called EXP+. And this is different than an EXP that you're going to find out in the stratosphere known as the Internet. And why that is an EXP+ actually consists of 3 different file formats. You have the EXP, which is purely stitch information. It shows the embroidery hoop where to move and where to take a stitch and where to stop for a color change. The second file in this EXP+ conglomerate is the INF file, and this is giving us color information. So if you digitized something and say you were using Isocore color 1928, when that particular object comes up on your embroidery machine, it would refer to Isocore color 1928. So this is giving us true color information. And the last file of the 3 that comprise an EXP+ is the BMP file. And this is the picture that is presented to us on our embroidery machines in the correct colors that you would that you would expect to see. Now, the issue is if you go onto some of these websites, and I do certainly, one of my favorites is Urban Threads. I wish I could receive a commission for every time I gave a shout out to that company. They do beautiful designs, very edgy. If you looked up an EXP design to see that you were going to be able to stitch that out on your machine, on your Bernina machine, you would find that you would absolutely have a successful stitch out. And in fact, the machine would stop after every color change, just like you would expect and hope for. The issue is that the color information is not there. So even though it might have, the original file might have color Isocore 1928, it might be reading, and it will be reading like the first default color in the palette. So you might have a gray deer with a purple palm tree with brown water, for instance, those types of things. So when I'm downloading designs from the internet, one of the things that I will absolutely do is I will download in a file format that is color specific. So a baby lock format, PES, is a safe bet. I would bring it into my embroidery software and save it as an EXP Plus. You will generally not see EXP Plus as a downloadable format, as it is pretty much OESD Bernina specific. And I'll show you how to do that during the video. So hopefully this is of some help, and now I'm going to go ahead into the interface itself and bring up our screen. So this is the screen as you open your software, and I really like how they have simplified the interface compared to prior versions of the software. It's very task specific, which is lovely. And I'm just going to go first through just to orient you to the graphic interface. As you would imagine, up here it's naming the software. We're at the Designer Plus level, and what we're having here are things that we would probably see in a lot of other programs. For instance, if I clicked on File, you would have the ability to open a design and save as. Just as an aside, when we're getting designs out of the software to use in our machine, if we click on Save As, what's going to happen is you're going to be saving as a editing file. And what I mean by that, do you see when the Save As type, when I click on this drop down, do you see how it is just saying like Art 8 or prior versions of the software, or this all-in-one format, EMB? What I'm not seeing here is like an EXP Plus or a JEF or a PES, things that we would like to see to save to a USB stick to bring to our machines, which is again called a stitch format. So remember that in this version of software, when we want to bring a design to our machine, it is not going to be save as. Rather, it's going to be either two ways. You can go File, and then you can say Export Machine File. Export Machine File. And when I get this window, now we're going to see the usual suspects. We're going to see things like our baby lock formats, Viking formats, FOF, things of this nature, and also things such as our Bernina USB stick, which is known as an EXP. Those of you that still have the beautiful Bernina 730 or 8 or the 200, you have your art specific format up here. So this is how we export to our machines. Would be again export machine file as opposed to a save as. Just wanted to give that little detour. This very first box up here, this one up here actually, this is, we'll call these in essence our canvas toolbars. And what we have up here in essence is, this is our art canvas, otherwise known as Corel Draw. And when I click on this, the initial time you bring the software up, the initial time you go into Corel, it takes a little while to load, only because it's installing the whole program for us. And what we have here now is our ability to draw graphics and things like that, which is kind of fun. This is representing a little sheet of paper for us. And we'll talk a little bit about this as we go. So this is the art canvas, and again, in summary, this is where we draw things. Generally it's with vector images, although we can work with bitmaps. We'll talk about the difference of those two as we work forward. This is our embroidery canvas, and this is what the software initially opens to. And in the embroidery canvas, what you're going to see is the ability to, in essence, I'm going to use the D word, digitize. How about we just use the word create? This is where we create stitches. This little guy here, this is our embroidery library, and this is where we can navigate not only to the designs that come with our software, of which there are around 700 or so designs. I do remind customers that although the software comes with designs, I do not buy the Bernina designer software for embroidery designs. I buy them because this is how I can now create things, or take things I already have and modify them in a slew of ways, which we'll learn in club and a little bit about here in the fundamentals class. The designs I consider just kind of a bonus, and they have some beautiful designs in there, but I buy this level of software not just to have designs that are made for me, but I want to create my own things, and you certainly can do so with great ease at this level of software. So this opens up a it's kind of like Windows Explorer, but it is built into our software. And what I have here is a file called My Embroidery, and this, if I'm saving things as I work on things, it will oftentimes default to like My Designs or My Machine Files. You can save them to any location you want, but this is kind of a nice place to look for things when you are looking for things. You also have Public Embroidery, and it's in Public Embroidery. You may recall that was that tree structure that we went through, that first slide that I showed you, and it's here. These are the designs that come with the embroidery software. So for instance, I'm teaching a class coming up. It's an event called 3D Embroidery. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing things like with trapunto work, stump work. You're actually inserting wire to make three-dimensional objects, if you could imagine. I just love it. That's pretty much a Bernina exclusive. Love the software. And that's coming up in a couple of weeks, so look forward to having people with me for that. But if I selected a category, let's just say arts and crafts, what you're going to see pop up are embroidery design thumbnails. And it's not just the thumbnail. This is going to give us a lot of information. Like even when I'm hovering over something, what will oftentimes happen is you'll get like a little pop-up of what is in that file. If I click on something, you'll see what will oftentimes pop up, and it'll tell me like the date that it was created, how large the design is, the number of stitches, the height, weight, and things of this nature. So I like that. If I wanted to bring a design in to the software, it is simply a matter of clicking on the design, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to either say open from selected, which means it's going to place it on whatever screen is currently active in our software, or new from selected, which means it will open up a new screen. So let me show you what I mean when I say this. I'm going to say open from selected, and here's my design. And what you're going to see, this is important, the initial screen was design 1. This is a generic term. In other words, if I said open from new, I would have a screen called design 2. And if I did it again, of course, design 3. But this is like actually pointing to a specifically named design, and that is what this is here. So that's how you open a design. If I go back into the embroidery library and click on, say, let's just click on another object. This is fun. And now I'm going to say new from selected. What happens now, do you see how new from selected is going to open it into a screen, and it's going to put it in as a generic name, design 3. So when I say new from selected, understand if I modified anything with this and then just saved the design, the original design would be saved, if you will. It would be kept in its original form. If, however, I was in this design, which is a specific name of a design, and I modified this, I made it larger, smaller, changed the colors. If I went up to File, Save, let me just show you, File, Save. If I clicked on Save, whatever changes I made in that design have now overwritten the original file. So a good, housekeeping thing you might want to consider is, if I'm going to be modifying these designs and then saving them, not exporting to the machine, mind you, saving the design as an Art8 file, I might want to consider saying New from Design, or another way we could do this is coming up here where it says Insert Embroidery. That will do the exact same thing. It will bring it up as a generic file name so that when you save it, it saves it as a new entity, separate and distinct from the initial files that came with your software. So I hope that kind of made sense. One of the things I love about the software is this is called the workspace. And in the workspace, I see things like my design. I might see my hoop if I have it turned on. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I get these tabs that will populate along the upper part of my screen here. And the thing that's lovely about that is, if I was going to go in and say copy and paste, or cut and paste, or take like maybe this little leaf and bring it into another design, it's very simple. I can just cut this guy out, come over to another design, and paste that one in. So it's nice because you can very quickly and easily go between designs, go between windows. You'll notice that by each design name there is a little X, and that's how you can close the windows up. And I'm going to go ahead and close these just to get back to where we had been. So again, these are the three canvases: the artwork, the embroidery canvas, and your embroidery library. This little guy here is how I can take embroidery designs and convert them into vector artwork. So it's kind of going in reverse from what you expect. Many people will come to me and say, Shannon, I want to know how I can take a piece of artwork and turn it into stitches. Well, this does it the other way. It'll take the stitches and turn it into artwork. And the reason why that is way cool is because now there are other applications that we can use, such as, I'm just going to throw something out here, it's like a cutter, like a cameo silhouette, and I can now start making things called SVG files. I don't want to make your head spin, but there's a lot of things this software can do, and that's definitely one of them. So to be able to convert embroidery to artwork and artwork to embroidery, having it as a two-way street, is fabulous. The next toolbar I want to speak about is this little guy here, and it's from here to here. And this guy, this is the one that is going to be our general toolbar. And things we can do in general toolbars would be things such as opening a new page. We just saw that a moment ago, so you can see here I've got my new page here. Things such as opening a design, or opening recent designs, prior ones that I had opened. Saving a design. This is a floppy disk. I think as we look at younger people and they do not know what a floppy disk is, this is kind of reaching its lifespan as far as cultural relevancy. So may want to change that icon. This is my direct to print, and the thing I love about printing up my designs is I can make templates, and we're going to be talking about that in a bit. And things such as a print preview, so I can see what I'm going to print. What I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and just bring in a design for us. So I'm going to go back into my embroidery library, and we'll go ahead and bring in this little nice design here, and we're going to just say open selected. I'm going to say new from selected, so it gives me a generic name. See, generic name, not the true name. Pretty. So what I have here is a very nice design, and as I work with this, what I just did is I tapped the T as in Tom, on my keyboard. And you see how I change from, we're going to call this like a working view or an editing view, and this is kind of the pretty view or the true view. They had that in a prior software called Explorations. No longer with us, but that's where that T on the T board comes from, true view or artistic view. It shows me the stitches in real. And so the thing I like about this is if something is selected, it turns pink. This design is grouped, so everything is selected when I click on it. And we'll talk more about grouping and ungrouping in a little bit. So once I have a design on my board, on my work surface, this icon, which I was going to talk about next, it had been grayed out, so I knew I had to bring in a design. This is another way that I can export designs to my machine. So if I click on this, this will give me, it first gives me a message. Look at this, it's saying that not everything is covered in my selected hoop. So let me go ahead and X out of this and tell you how it knew that. Do you see this little red border around here? This little red border is giving me the legal area or the stitching area of a hoop. Now this is not for just Bernina, this is for any machine. What you see as far as the perimeter of the hoop and what is the place where the machine can actually stitch in is always less. It's always less, and it's because the anatomy of a embroidery foot, it takes up space, and you don't want the foot, of course, to hit the back of the hoop. So I could, and I will, just because we can, I could select the design, and when the design is selected, do you see how these numbers up here populate? So this is telling me the size of the design in inches. I can also change it to another unit of measurement if I wanted to, into metric, with just a click of a button. And what I would like to do is I would like to bring this down in size. There's a couple of ways I can do this. If I wanted to keep it proportional, you see how there's like a little lockbox here? This is proportional scaling. I could come up here and swipe the number out and say type in the number 4, so 4 inches. And you'll see what happened is the other number changed accordingly to make the design rescale proportionately. I'm going to come up here to the undo, which is another tool we have in that general toolbar that we're currently discussing. That brought it back up to its real size. I could come up here and grab hold of this selection handle. Do you see when I hover over the selection handle? Do you see how the arrow changed to a 2-pointed arrow? And as I'm hovering here, do you see how it's giving me the dimensions in the unit of measurement that I have selected? If I left click and hold and drag, what will happen is this will proportionately change, and it's giving me in percentage how much I'm changing the design. When I let go of the mouse, it will now bring it into the correct dimension that I had placed on it. I'm going to go ahead and bring this back up into the center here, and you can see now the design is enclosed within this red border. And so with that, what I can do is now I can come up to this sewing machine icon, click on it, and this will give me this dialog. And the reason why we have several different ways or icons showing me how to get the design out of the software is because we have many different machines in the Bernina lineup. If I wanted to save it as the EXP Plus, this was what I would select. So if those of you with, say, a 560 through a Bernina 880, this is the file format that you want. And if you have one of the lovely deco machines or one of the older embroidery machines, 180s, etc., that have still the serial port or Aurora class, those types of things, you would be with this icon here. And those of you with the Bernina 730/200, you're saving your file format as an ART. And so if I had a USB stick in my computer, I would click on this and it would save it over for us. And we'll look at that also in class today. So Just wanted to show how that two ways to do this. You either file, export, machine type file, or just clicking on the icon here. So I could also take this and cut it, and then go into a new window, and then I would come over here and paste it. I could certainly take this design. I'm going to make this a little smaller yet. I could take that design and now copy. Notice the copy is leaving the copy here. Cut takes whatever you selected away. It still puts it on, I'm going to call this the clipboard. It's what's in your computer, and that's where when you cut or copy, it gives this information onto that clipboard, and then I can simply click paste, and it will paste another copy of that image right on top of the initial one. Notice that paste can work multiple times. I could come up here once again and paste yet again. It always pastes over where the original file was, and I could bring the design in like so. Just so that you're aware, there's a keyboard shortcut. I don't know a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but one that I certainly do is Control D, because Control D does an automatic copy and paste for me. I love that, so it saves me 2 clicks. So Control D as in David. It's a nice one to remember. The other one I would remember is, well, it's this one. See, I've got 4 designs here, and it's Control A. Control A as in apple, so that selects all. So 2 keyboard shortcuts early on in the class. I'm going to go ahead and delete that screen, and we don't need to save. And we're just going to go back to the original design. So we talked briefly about, of course, this is undo and redo. This is another way that I can bring in embroidery, and this is equivalent to when you bring in one under the embroidery library, when you say new from selected. This is very similar then, if not the same, new from selected. So when I click on this, this brings me into my insert embroidery screen. Notice where I am. It's usually the last place I had been, which is this PC, my hard drive, users, public embroidery, Bernina 8, and then this was the last category I was in. These butterflies are way cute. I'm going to be using this in creating stump work in that 3D class that I'll be presenting soon. And I'm going to go ahead and click on open, and so I've got the little design in here, which is nice. By the way, do you see how I keep bringing this design up into the center? One of the things that you can do is you can have the software do the heavy lifting for you. And how I can do that is I'm going to come down here to where we have this hoop. This is like a hoop icon. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and right click on this hoop icon. And what I have is this place here where I have hoop position, and I'm going to say automatic centering. And so what will happen is when I move this, do you see how the hoop now follows me? And it's always in the center. If I had another object, let me go ahead and do that for you. Do you all remember how we make an automatic copy paste? If you said Control D as in David, you win the prize. So here is my second butterfly. And do you see now as I position these, do you see how the hoop does its best to try to keep both designs centered and in the hoop? If I brought one way out here, do you see how now it's incapable of doing that? In this case, if I was going to stitch something like this out using this particular hoop, which is called the large oval hoop, I would have to do something called splitting the design and multi-hooping the design. So continuing with the general toolbar, what we have here with the object selected, I'm going to come up here first and select my select tool. The last thing that was digitized, or if there's just one object on the page, when you activate this, this will be selected. So working further down, the insert artwork is just that. It is to insert a vector image or a bitmap, and from there you could digitize off of that as a backdrop, or you could use some of the automatic tools to turn that art image into stitches. The next icon here, this is for the properties of the object that is selected. Notice that when I hover over these icons, one of the things that you'll oftentimes see is where it says press F1 for more information. And I'm going to do that for you at this time. I'm going to press F1, and what this does is it brings up the embroidery help file, but it does it in a way that it is referencing what you are hovering over. So that's a very powerful tool. And so as you hover over an icon, if you do hit F1, understand that you'll be taken to a part of the embroidery help file that will give you some information on that particular topic. And then you'll see something down here called related topics, and these are, I'm going to call these hyperlinks. So every time I click on this, like say creating textured edges, it will take me specifically to that particular topic. So this is a way of kind of branching off to other topics that are related to the initial one that you had looked for. So we have the properties of the object, and depending on what you have selected, it might be properties of a fill stitch or an outline or lettering or tying in and tie off. This is where you would make those adjustments. It's one of the ways you can get to it. Notice that there's a little button here called Effects, and what the software does for your convenience is the next icon over is just that screen. It's Effects, and it's here that we look at the properties of things like fancy fills or underlay, which underlay, consider that kind of like the skeleton of an embroidery design. It helps keep the embroidery from puckering and keeping our registration of various objects in a design true to where they had been digitized. We'll learn more about these in clubs as we go forward, but that effects page which we got to here is, and the properties page can also be toggled back and forth here. So if I click on properties, I get to the property page, and effects, I get to the effect page. Very similar functions with these two buttons here. This next one, it looks kind of like a wrench and a hammer. When I click on this, this brings the options page, and this is where I set up things in the software as I begin to work so that it behaves the way that I want it to for that particular project. You'll see that I have here the tab machine and hoop selected, and the thing I love about the software is I can select my hoops based on my machine as opposed to seeing a long list of all hoops from all manufacturers. So say for example that I was embroidering with a with an 880, an 8 series machine, 830, 880. What I would do is I would select the machine, and then only the hoops that go for this machine will be there, including the jumbo hoop, the maxi, the mega, and this is a new hoop out of Bernina's university. We just had it called the midi hoop. And for those of you that have gotten or will be getting the upgrade, highly recommend for the 7 series or the 8 series. It gives you improved functionality, or I shouldn't say improved, additional functionality. And this new hoop from Bernina, the midi hoop, which I'm going to enjoy because it has that same ratcheting system that we have with both the jumbo and the maxi hoop. So if I was going to say choose my jumbo hoop, what I can also do is tell the software what foot do I have on. I'm going to move this screen over to the side because remember when I was referring to this red line which shows us the legal area where we could put embroidery designs? It's dependent on what foot you have chosen. So in my case, this is the standard foot 26. We use that, I'm going to say, a good 80% of the time at least with embroidery. With our 3D class coming up, we're going to learn about the fabulousness of foot 43 and, of course, foot 44C. And so I'm going to go ahead and just choose 43, which I can couch yarns with, which is nice. And when I say OK, just watch the line here, you'll see that it not only updated the hoop for me, but it also reestablished the new legal area where that design can be chosen. I'm going to go back into that hoop function, and I can do it in 2 ways. I can go under the options category. We just saw this. like so, and then choosing my hoop, I'm going to go ahead and choose that large oval so we're keeping with the same size hoop and saying OK. That's one way, and again, you'll see how the border changed. You know, remember it was red at one point, right? Now this bluish color, and it's further in from the perimeter. That area in the objects properties that options that I was just in can also be had with the hoop icon here. Notice that when I hover over it, it gives me two functions: show hoop / settings. The show hoop is if I left click on the icon, so the hoop is gone and the hoop is back. Those were two left clicks. Now if I right click, what happens is I bring up properties for that icon, and this is a very similar function to many of the icons that we see in the software. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and I can say choose my machine. Let me just choose a 7 series machine. Let's say I'm embroidering on the beautiful Bernina 790, and I'm going to have my large oval hoop, and I'm going to tell it I'm going to go back to foot 26. And remember, we talked about this before, automatic centering my design. And then when I click OK, you would see, of course, that this is now reestablished with this particular legal area and the design. Some of you might be asking or thinking to yourself, well, I love the Bernina software, but I'm actually embroidering on another brand's machine. And so again, if I right click on here and I go under machines, understand that although we do have our Berninas listed at the top, as I scroll down, you're going to see that now we have other machine brands. And if I choose one of those machine brands, such as, let's just say a Elissimo, when I look at the hoops, you're going to see now the hoops are different, based once again on the machine. Now, our software does a really good job of showing you all of the different hoops that are employed for the different machines. But let's just say that you have a hoop that is not being represented here. Maybe it's an off-brand hoop that you are using, and you would like to, in essence, create a new hoop. Well, that's where this Create button comes in handy. And when I click on Create, I can call this something very unique, like my new hoop. And I can also say, well, is this hoop a rectangle? Is it round? Is it circular, square? Is it a sliding? Is it a 3 position? Let's just say it's an oval hoop. And I can now further define the height, the width, the total area, and save the hoop. And when I save the hoop, now you'll see that in addition to the Bernina hoops that come standard with the software, I now have a new hoop that I can choose from. And when I say OK, now that hoop is being displayed. Nice feature, nice feature. Now, going back into it again with a right click, I can also edit these hoops. So if I go under Edit, I can now change whatever value. Let's say that this is actually 9 inches in the area here, and when I save the hoop, it will update that information. I can further take this hoop, and this is what I'm going to do right now, and delete the hoop. You cannot delete hoops that are standard with the software, and we can see that because this is grayed out. So going further forward, we talked about this. This was the units of measurement. Pay attention to what I have here. If I come in here and say metric, you'll see that these numbers are updated. The thing I love about the software is if I chose, I could absolutely, let me go back to my large oval hoop. If I chose to, like say I'm still in metric, I could come in here, proportional lock is on, and I can say I really want the width of this to be 4 inches, but I don't know what 4 inches is in metric. So I could just click in 4 and then put in an inch mark, and when I hit enter, it has updated that, and if I measured this across in width, it would be 4 inches. I could do the exact same thing in metric. In other words, if I'm in the US marking system and say I was working with a PDF file of a software lesson, and it was saying that I needed to make the width of this 120 millimeters. I could again swipe out the number, put in 120 mm, hit enter, and now that has resized. So I do not have to be necessarily in the unit that I'm working with. I can either put the inch symbol or the mm for millimeters, and the software will understand what I mean and make the conversion for me. Love that. This next area in here, this is regarding our dockers. And what are dockers? Dockers live on the right side of the screen. And this is important, what I'm going to tell you next, because sometimes we play tricks on ourselves. And what we might do is, like, say, for instance, this color film docker, I might come up here and X out of this. And now I no longer have my color film here. And so you're trying to work along with the software lesson, or you're in club, and unfortunately I say, oh, open up your color film, and it's over on the right hand side of the screen, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh my God, I'm not seeing it. It's because you X'd out of it accidentally. I do it all the time, so you're in good company. So what I can do is I can come up here. This is my color film icon for my docker, and when I click on that and then I just let it go ahead and auto hide, we'll see that once again it's over here for quick reference when I need it. Color film, by the way, while we're here, might as well say, this is a lovely way of selecting things in the design. Currently, the color film is giving me each object based on its color. So this is what they call the color view, if you will. Some softwares refer to this as a sequencer. In other words, this will stitch first, stitch second, stitch last. And I really like that name for this docker rather than the color film, because I can come up here and I can say show objects. And now what you're seeing is each individual object in the design, regardless of the color. So it's still based on, group by color. All these are the same color, but these are all of the individual objects. These are just traveling stitches to the next object until you get to the next color. So two different ways to kind of see this. And if I wanted to reorder things for whatever reason, I could click on an object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ungroup this design. Because notice that if I select one, everything is selected. You see how this has all turned pink because I'm again in that design view versus the true view. And you'll see that it doesn't matter what I select on the design, everything is selected. And we can see something is selected in the color film because the chip has a blue background. So if I come over to the design and if I right click, I will get a contextual menu where I can do some very important functions like rotating, aligning, and things of this nature. What I'm looking for is the ability to ungroup, to unlock these objects from one another so I can select individual components. Notice that this is also giving me the keyboard shortcuts. As I'd mentioned earlier in the video, I don't know a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but the ones I do know I use most often, and certainly Control U for ungroup versus Control G for group are two things to kind of have in your bonnet to remember. It just makes things a little quicker to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and ungroup. And so now you'll see that if I select an individual object, only that object is chosen. And if I go under the color film, you'll see now I can select a specific color. And if I wanted to, for whatever reason, say make this stitch last, I can bring this all the way down here, and now that's in the last position. Or if I wanted to bring it back to where it had been, I simply come up here and let go. Notice that once I have an individual object selected, or color in this case selected, these all become active now. They hadn't been before. You see they looked like this, but once I select an object, either by doing this or by clicking on the chip itself, I could take this and say move this back one, or move this forward one, or move this to the start of the design, move this to the end of the design, or a sequence as I select things. I can select individual objects and make them stitch out in the order that they were selected. That's a topic for another lesson. So I like the color film, and again, these dockers exist on the right side of the software, and if you don't see one, because you might have X'd out of it, remember that you can bring it back by clicking here. So the next tool I want to speak about is the zoom tool. And there's an icon here. If I click on it, you'll see that now my arrow has turned into a magnifier. And say I wanted this right wing zoomed in up close and personal, I can left click and hold, drag a box around that left wing, and when I let go of the mouse button, that is now zoomed into view. I can furthermore, if I wanted to, again, activate the tool, and if I right click on the design, not a left click and drag, but just a right click, you'll see how I'm zooming back out in increments. Notice also when I'm hovering up here that it gives me the shortcut key, which is Control B, or I should say just B on the keyboard. So if I click B on the keyboard, what you'll see is your zoom tool come about. And if you wanted to let go of the tool, you just hit Escape on the keyboard, and that will let that go as well. You know, there's an easier way, I think, in zooming. And I'm going to go back into the Options toolbar, which is up here, and I want to go into this thing called scrolling. Now, when we're doing digitizing work, I know some of you are using the touch pads that are on your notebook computers, and what I highly, this comes from the heart, recommend is don't do that. You're just going to have a much easier time of it if you use a mouse that is connected to the computer, and most mice these days have scroll wheels on it, so there's a left button, a right button, and a scroll wheel, and they call it here a mouse wheel. And so what you'll see here is the default action is to zoom in. You can also make it do other things like horizontal scroll, vertical scroll, or zoom in at a quicker rate, shall we say. I prefer this to be zoom at 1.25, and I do want you to know that if you're using that mouse wheel, if you hold down the Alt, notice that it will vertically scroll. If you hold down instead Control, it was horizontally scroll, and if you hold down Shift, it will zoom twice as fast. This is important. If you're using this, I highly recommend making sure there's a check mark here where it says center pointer when zooming. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and I have my cursor selected right over this little object, and I'm going to literally push the mouse wheel forward towards the computer, and you see how I'm scrolling in and I'm scrolling out. Now once I'm scrolled in, maybe I want to go see the other wings, so if I hold down Control, you'll see how that lets me scroll horizontally. And if I wanted to select you see the lower wing or see things in the lower wing, I would hold down the Alt key, A-L-T, and see how I can now go up and down. I love that about the mouse behavior in the software. I'm going to let go of the Alt key, and now I'm just taking the mouse wheel and pulling it back towards me, and that's how I zoom out. So although I love the zoom function using the mouse wheel, I'm going to show you where people run into issues. So you see how I have my cursor right over the little body of the butterfly? And if I keep my cursor on that body, you see how it's zooming true or straight? This is what's going to happen to you when you're doing things that I do periodically as well. I'll have my cursor here and I'm looking at the butterfly, but my cursor's over here. So as I zoom in, with each subsequent zoom, well, you saw what happened. My design disappeared. And you're going to be going, oh my, or something similar. My design disappeared and I don't know how to find it. And you could kind of use these scroll bars and it's no, it's not there. And I can grab this scroll bar here to go up and down vertically. Oh, it's not here. Oh my, oh my, oh my. So how you can find your design is if you go up to this next little area here, this is your zoom scale, and if you click on it and you go to zoom to fit, your butterfly comes back. So that's a keeper. And the other thing just to show is when you're zooming in, we had already learned that you could absolutely hold either the control key to go horizontally or the alt key to go vertically. But you also have this little overview window. And the overview window, if you look right here, there's a little tiny box that's showing me where I'm zoomed in at. And I can certainly take that little box and put it to wherever I want to see in that design. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Watch how this little box starts to grow. See how the box is getting bigger? So now with that little box, I can take it, move it, say, to the lower part of the wing and see where I'm working there. So it's another way of navigating, but now using this overview window, which I got to from up here. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom to fit once again. Now, your zoom dialog here is really contingent upon what is happening on the screen. Now currently, you see I have two objects. I have a hoop, which is an object. You're not going to stitch it out, of course. And I also have a design that is not selected. So when I click on this down arrow, I've got all these percentages that I can zoom in by. I can also zoom to fit that we just saw. That brings the butterfly up close and personal. Zoom to hoop, which zooms it to as large as it can and still see the entire hoop. I could, if I come over here, and by the way, you see how some of these icons have a yellow background and others don't? The yellow background, like here, these three, the yellow background depicts an icon that is active. It's active. Whereas this one, for instance, is inactive. So I'm going to come over here. This hoop icon is active. And we've been right-clicking on it before. You might recall a right-click gives me the dialog where I can choose hoops and pressure feed and if it's going to center or not. But if I left-click on this dialog, it now hides the hoop. Now the interesting thing is when I go up to the zoom dialog, now I've got percentages of zooming, zoom to fit because there's still an embroidery object, but do you see how the hoop is no longer there? Now, if I deselect, bring the hoop in, zoom to fit still there because there's an object, zoom to hoop is now there because there's a hoop. Now, this is kind of interesting. If I come into the design, remember it's grouped, so how can I ungroup it? I can certainly right click and I can come up and go ungroup or use the shortcut key. Control U would be another way. And if I go Control U, now that is ungrouped. And if I zoom in by holding my cursor here and just select this little piece here, whoop, let's try that again. Ungroup, Control U. And let's select that again. So I've just got that little piece selected. So now what do I have here? I have something that's selected. I have an embroidery object. I have a hoop. When I come up here, watch what's happened. I now have 3 ways that I can zoom in addition to percentages. So I can zoom to the selected object, and now I'm up close and personal. I'm going to go back to hoop. Now, this background color is an okay color to embroider against or digitize or create against. It's kind of a cream color, at least on my screen, the way I'm seeing it. You could change the color. The colors that I would not recommend would be white or black because that's very common thread colors, white and black. If you had a particular object, let's say that it was an indigo color, you could make the color of the background indigo. And how we can do that is if I go under the design and then go under background. What I have here is the solid color, and if I click down here, you can see that I can change it to whatever color I want. And if I click on, say, this color, and then say, let me show more colors, you can now see that if I go custom, I can now change that turquoise to whatever color I want. And you can see kind of a after and a before effect, so you have something to compare it to. I could take this also and bring it down here and like see something's in the greens, etc. So it's a nice way of viewing colors. I'm going to go back to standard, and I'm just going to kind of change this to kind of a lighter beigey type of color, kind of sort of similar to what we had here. It won't be exact, but that's fine. And when I click on OK, you will see that the background has changed to one color, and you see how now the hoop color is now a different color. So there is utility to that as well. I'm going to come back here, I'm going to go back under background, and I'm going to take this, and we're just going to go ahead and say recent there, and this guy here, we'll just go recent so they're matching, and say OK, and they're matching again. Thing I want to show you here, which is kind of cool, and even seasoned users forget we have this feature, so I'm glad we're all here today. I'm going to go under background, and I'm going to go under factory article, and what these are just general slopers, if you will, of garments and objects, etc. So things like caps and kid clothes and lady clothes and men clothes, and all about blanks, which might be onesies and things of this nature. It's kind of cool. I'm just going to go ahead and select a lady's shirt, and just because I can, this short sleeve shirt will be fine. And as far as the color, let me kind of make this a different color. Let's just make this, I don't know, a what color would I wear? None of these. Let's just do kind of a turquoisey. That's going to be fine for now. And I'm going to click OK. And now what I have is this article of clothing, just moving my mouse wheel, this article of clothing with a hoop on it. Why is this kind of a cool feature? Well, let's just say I wanted it on this pocket here. So what I can do is I can bring this design up to here, and that thing was selected. I can bring this design up to here. And now it kind of gives me an idea of, well, maybe I want that a little smaller. You see what I'm saying? It kind of gives me an idea of how to size designs. And if I wanted to if I had a shirt this color, I could look at the design and say, well, you know, that color's fine. Let me put this in true view so we can kind of, ooh, that's kind of pretty actually. But you know, it kind of gives me an ability to size, rotate, those types of things. But why I'm showing you this is now when we're looking at our zoom feature, and let me go ahead and I'm just going to select once again that little piece here, this little guy here. So now what I have when I use my zoom is I've got to fit, which brings the butterfly up close and personal, to selected, which zooms in on what I have selected, to article, which is the article of clothing, and to hoop, which is, of course, the hoop. So the take home here is we've got multiple zoom factors. We can do it by percentage, the wheel mouse, and also two things that are physically on the screen that we have interest in. I love that about the software. So the next set of tools, and this is still related to magnifying and viewing things, is this pan tool. Now, you might recall when we lost our butterfly design, I briefly kind of showed how I can grab hold of this. I'm going to call this an elevator button, and I can make this go north and south, or if I grab hold of this, east and west, and I can do it by little increments such as this or such as this, and the same function holds true here. A more intuitive way to kind of see things is the pan tool. So if I grab hold of the pan tool, we know the shortcut key is P, you can see my cursor turn to a hand, and when I left click and hold and then drag, you see how I can pretty much be wherever I want in this design. So as far as where I'm viewing, and this again is this pan tool. Further, as far as viewing things, this is called traveling in an object, and notice once again I'm in the design view or editing view of the software, and I like this because I can see what I have selected. Remember, to get back to the artistic view or the true view, it is just the T on the keyboard to toggle that back and forth. to use these functions as far as these traveling stitches, it's best to be in this editing view. And what I have are forward and back arrows, and I can travel forward or back based on jumping to the beginning or the end of the design, by color of the design, or by object of the design. And let me briefly show you how this works. So I'm going to go travel to the beginning or the end, and if I go the back button, this is at the very beginning of the design. Notice how everything is black. That means these things have not been stitched out yet, and we're just looking at the order of way things are being stitched. And the first thing I'm going to show is to travel by color. And so when I click the first time, what I see is this reddish color. These are all of the objects that are red in colors, the first object that's going to be stitched out. When I click another time, now what I have are, that's the traveling stitches, now what I have are the orange objects in the design. And as a coincidence, the last object is black, and if I click on here, it's just showing you still black, but if I had, say this was purple, it would be purple showing. So that's travel by color. I'm going to go ahead and travel to the end or beginning of the design again, so everything is black, and this is showing traveling by object. Now on my computer it's a little difficult to see. This is a 4K monitor. This newest update did a tremendous job in making it more usable. I would like to see some of these little nodes and traveling functions a little bit bigger, and I'm sure that's going to be for a future update. But as I now click forward, traveling forward in the object, what you're going to see, what appeared right there, this is where the needle is. Let me zoom in on that and see if we can see a little better. So that little X there, if you will, or plus sign, that is where the needle position currently is. If I click on the travel forward design again, you can see the needle ended up here. These stitches are now red, or whatever color that is, maybe an orange, and that was the next object that was stitched out. I'm going to zoom back out, and as I continue subsequent going forward, you'll see the needle traveled up here, and with each object, here's the next object stitched out. So it's either showing me a traveling stitch or an object or a fill of some sort. Now it went here, etc. So it's just a way of viewing how this design is being stitched out. I'm just doing subsequent clicks, and you'll see how more things are being shown. So that's the traveling stitches. Because it's related, I'm just going to hop down to this. This is the player, and so stitch players are very useful in that it gives me kind of a lesson on how this is going to be stitching out. Really useful with applique. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the stitch player, and I'm going to pause this just for the moment, because what you're going to see here in essence is kind of a stop button, a play button, which is here. Move to the next color, move to the end, move to the beginning. Very similar to what we saw here. But what this does, which is lovely, is it's showing me the 3 different colors that are being used, and when I click on go forward, it is now showing me how it's going to be stitching out. This is stitches per minute. If I click here, I can speed this up. I can have it go ahead and play backwards, so it's going to go in reverse now. Go back forward. That's just stitching to the next color. Still going backwards, however. I'm going to go ahead and stop that. Let me go back into the player, because the other thing I want to show, let me stop, beg your pardon. Let me go ahead and pause this, pause. Pause is just hitting the play again. Right here there's a slider, and if I grab hold of the slider, do you see how I have more of a manual control over what's happening on the screen? So I can go backward, I can go forward, and again, this is a great educator, showing me what stitch number I'm currently on. It's a great educator because, again, if I'm doing, say, an applique, I can see like the placement stitch, the tack down. If I'm making a bag in the hoop, I can see each step of the way, so I'm not being surprised by what's going to happen next. Like I'll know where to put the zipper tape down and those types of things. So the stitch player, really useful for this. It's also very good for using when you're doing lettering objects to make sure they're stitching out in a good order that would not give you, say, a greater propensity to get puckering in the projects, etc. So again, the stitch player that lives here, and I love, love, love that function. Now, we had talked briefly about these functions here, and this is how I would take a design and rechange the size as opposed to clicking on the selection handle. Notice how this end of the icons, they are all grayed out as opposed to this. See, this is not grayed out, this is grayed out. If something's grayed out, like here, this is grayed out, here, these are grayed out, it means that it's not applicable based on what is currently happening in the workspace, which is here. So if I happen to click on this design and now it's selected, do you see how these icons have now all become active? With the exception of paste, because we don't have anything on the clipboard because we have not copied or cut at this point. Now, the thing I like about this is these give you some very, very commonly used functions as far as changing a design, such as I could take the design when it's selected and click, say, rotate it 45 degrees, or let me just bring it back to where it had been. I could come in here and say, I need this to be rotated 12 degrees, and when I hit enter, it is subsequently rotated that much. I'll go ahead and undo that. I can also take this and say, I would like this skewed 20 degrees. And when I hit enter, it's kind of like if you had lettering, it's like italicizing lettering. I'm going to go ahead and undo that as well. These types of things that we had just done can also be accomplished by the selection handles from an object that is selected. Notice if it is not selected, there are no black little boxes around here. There's a total of 8 of them. But if it is selected, now we have these selection handles. If I grab again a corner handle, it will change things proportionately. If I happen to grab on a middle or a top one, it will change things disproportionately. Like this is now going to grow the design just in width. I'm going to undo that. This would grow the design strictly in height. I'll undo that as well. Now, as far as the rotating functions, we get those by clicking on the object a second time. So when I click on the object a second time, do you see how these handles have now come hollow? So let me kind of zoom in on here. This is the selection handle that's hollow. If I click on it a second time, do you see how it's solid versus hollow? I'm going to zoom back out. Easy way to do that. Once again, zoom to fit. Come back just a bit more. So with the hollow handles, when I hover over one, the arrows are pointing in an opposite direction than they were initially. And if I lift, click, and drag, do you see how I'm changing the angle or the rotation of the design? And I can do that very specifically. Furthermore, let me undo that. If I grab hold of this middle handle and move over, now what I'm doing is I'm skewing it a specific angle, very similar to what I was doing here and here. Let me undo that. Over here, this is to proportionately reduce the design by 20% or by increasing it 20%. One thing I'd like to point out is down below here, let me get into this function, and I'm also going to bring back up my little halo so you can kind of see where my cursor is. Way down here, there is a little box right here, and this box has the stitch count, how many stitches are in this design. This little box is showing me the size of this particular design, and we see those same numbers being reflected up here. It's just another place for them to reside. So this is giving me important information such as the size of the design and the number of stitches. Go ahead and get get that out of there. Notice that when I click on the object, if you continue to look down here where the numbers are, when I increase this, do you see how the stitch count increased? Let me go ahead and undo that. And again, if I took this and say make it 20% smaller and just clicked it, you'll see that that is now 20% smaller and the stitch count updates accordingly. And I'll undo that as well. This will flip the design on the x-axis versus the y-axis. So I can be here and it will flip it this way and back to where it had been, or flip it on the vertical axis and back up. So that is that bar in total, with the exception of these two guys here. These are the select tools. These two here are select tools. And what I'd like to show, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and ungroup this again. So the design is selected, and I can go ahead and go Control U, or I could come up here and go into a right click and say ungroup. So that's a couple of different ways to do that. Let me go ahead and ungroup it. So showing the polygon select, I would click on it looks like a star, and it's now just a series of clicks. And what I'm doing is I'm just creating an outline around this object. And it's a way of getting at things when it's kind of hard to get at it via a box. And I don't have to come up here to close it. All I have to do is hit enter and it realizes what I want to do. And now if I wanted to, I could grab this piece and move this off, maybe copy it and paste it into another window, those types of things. So the first tool, which you're going to use the majority of the time, your contemporary selection tool, is just drawing a box around the object and selecting. And this polygon select is really good when you're trying to get inside an object and there are other objects that may get in the way of you using the rectangle tool. So love that about this. So I'll talk about this reshape tool when we start talking about creating objects. So we're going to put that on the back burner for now. This next set of objects, which are here, these objects from here to here, these are all view objects, how we see, how we look at things in the software. And so to best kind of illustrate that, let me go ahead and I'm going to back out of here just a bit, and we'll go ahead and delete this design here, and like so. And so what I can do is absolutely we'll bring in another design, because we've been working with a little butterfly for a bit. And let's say I'm going to bring in this little paisley design here, and I'll say open or new from selected. So again, it does not bring it in under its design name. So if I make changes here, all is not lost. And I'm going to have this selected, and what I would like to do is get this so that it will fit inside this hoop. So I'm going to bring it down in size, and as we can see now, it's inside within the legal area of that hoop. So things that I could turn on and off, if you will, is this guy here. This is saying show the true view, and we saw this earlier by the keyboard shortcut T, but this is the icon of the same function. Remember, things that don't have a yellow background are inactive, and so I can turn that on or off. This has to deal with artwork. We'll talk about that soon. That's how we can dim the artwork using that as a backdrop. This is to show the stitches. So as I come in here a little closer, you'll see that these all these little white points here are the stitch points, and if I click that, I am no longer seeing the stitches in between, just the stitch points here. And if I click on this, this is the outline, so you see the outline of the object is now no longer seen. These are the actual stitch points. And when I click on that, you're going to see that even though there still is an embroidery design there, how do I know? Because the size is here, the stitch count is here. That's always a good thing to get into check. If you ever lose your design for whatever reason, like again, zooming in like we showed before where the cursor was not on the design and the design went stage right or stage left, always get in the habit of looking down here. So as long as you see stitch counts, there's something on the screen, but you may have it hidden. So again, if I go under True or Show Artistic View, it comes back. It comes back. So, love that. This little guy here is to show connectors, and I see that generally when I'm in the artistic view, when I see connectors, it's showing me where the connectors are another way of saying jump stitches. So how I get from one point of the design to the other is the needle ties off, comes in, over here, ties in, and then continues to stitch. If I don't need to see these little jump stitches, which are not sewn, all I have to do is turn that guy off. These icons here have to deal with if I have specific things like vector images or bitmap images on my screen, which I currently do not have. I can either see them or hide them by these icons here. If I had applique and I was showing fabric in the applique, this is how I would turn that on. This is stump work, seeing the stump work designs, the sub designs I should say. That's how that'll be shown. And some of this is not in a fundamentals class, and that's why I look forward to having you in clubs and in the various classes that I teach where we go more into things like stump work and 3D embroidery. This little guy here, this is to show the template in your hoop. And your hoops, all hoops with all manufacturers for the most part, can't think of any that don't, they have these little plastic templates that fit into your hoop. And these templates are beautiful as far as helping us get better positioning of the actual physical stitch out of the garment. So I can show the template or not. And then this guy here has to deal with the grid. Now, the grid helps me position things. Now, not necessarily embroidery objects in the hoop, although if I had a couple and I had to align things, that would be handy. I use the grid a lot when it comes to digitizing. If I needed to create, say, a good rectangle of a certain dimension, or if I wanted to do things called snap to grid, where objects come and they snap to certain points on the grid for alignment issues, it's a great thing to have. I tend to unclutter the screen as much as possible while I'm working because it's just less things for my eye to have to concentrate on. This has to deal with your rulers. We've seen them throughout. I generally have this on, but if you're ever in the software and you don't have your rulers, remember it may be turned off. So the next thing I'm going to show is working with work areas, and this is a visual representation of a project. It could be a round tablecloth or it could be a table runner for that matter. So up here, this is how I define my work area. If I click on it, you're going to see kind of a little square that's turned out here. And what I'd like to do also is let me get this background color just a little lighter so that we have a better contrast here. So again, I'm going to go under Design, Backgrounds, I'm going to go under Edit. We're going to lighten this up a little bit here. And I'm going to go Custom Colors. Let's bring a little more light into that. I think that's going to be great. And don't need a separate color inside that hoop. And so we'll say, let's just say there and call it a day. And so yeah, that's a little bit better, a little bit more contrast we can see. So I've got my work area here, but unless I'm dealing with, let's right click to see the properties or the settings, unless I'm dealing with a 10 by 10 inch square, which could be a quilt block, what I'd like to do is define my project. So let's say it's a table runner. Let's say the width is 36 inches and the height is, we'll leave that at 10, that'll be fine. And when I click OK, you'll see the little area here being defined. In fact, what I can do is I can come in here where it says pick a color, more colors, and let's just as we did with the background, I'm going to make this just a little darker just so we can have a better contrast. I think that's looking a little better there. So what I want to do is, here's the representation of the table runner. I'm going to go ahead and bring in a design. And so I'm looking at designs. That looks like it would be great. And I'm going to say, let's go ahead and go open or new from selected. and that brings it into a new design area. I'm just going to go ahead and copy, come back into my area here and paste, and wow, that looks like I think the lesson's done. That looks great. Now we're going to go ahead and take this, because we can, it's selected, I'm going to reduce it in size by 20%. Now I'm going to make another copy of this and put it over to the right. In fact, I'm going to reduce this maybe just a little bit more. Yeah, something like that would be nice. And I'm going to say Control D to copy, move this over to the side here, and because I can, I'm going to click rotate left twice, 45 degrees. I'm going to bring this over here like so. That's still looking a little bit big to me, so I'm going to bring this down just a tad. That's going to look better. We'll kind of place it kind of sort of where it's going to be. I'm going to go ahead and take this object once again. I'm going to say Control D. This time I'm going to slide it over this way. Why did I do it that way? Because I wanted to remind you that you can also, instead of clicking on the 45-degree rotations, you could click on here, hollow handles, turn this till it's going to give you about 90 degrees, and so right about there sounds like a winner. I want to take this, make it the same size as this. Well, how big is this? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to click here, and this is telling me that this is a height of 8.921. So if I come over here and make this a height of 8.921, those guys should be identical. Now, these things fit into the project. I think it's kind of a clever and nice looking design. What I might want to do is kind of get the spacing and the alignment a little bit better. I could certainly try all eyeballing it, and I could certainly activate my grid, which would help me like maybe get onto a specific grid line. I could also, this is crazy, but if I left click and drag here, do you see how I get these guidelines? So there's a guideline there, and if I come over here, there's now a guideline here, and these guidelines can also help me with positioning. What I would rather do, here are the guidelines kind of up close and personal. Sorry, they don't look very well on my monitor. What I'd rather do, though, is let me use some of the tools in the various toolboxes. So the first thing I'm going to do is say Control A to select everything, and I'm going to come down to where it has Arrange. And just to remind, when you're looking at grouping and ungrouping, here's another place where you see those functions. So we got there by a right click. We also got there by the shortcut Control G or Control U, and also under Arrange, group or ungroup. Earlier in the video I was fiddling up here because in prior versions of the software, that's where those functions were located. So we have all of these three little objects selected, and what I would like to first do is align centers. When I click on this, just look at here. So as I click on that, do you see how they all kind of jump so that the centers on the horizontal are now all aligned? It would also be grand if I had the spacing between this object identical to the spacing with this object. And it's easy to do in the Bernina software, because now all I need to do is go over here where it says space evenly across, click on this, and we see how the object jumped accordingly. So great functions in the software. And again, that's working with workspaces. Up here, this one is working with quilt blocks, and just another way of defining design areas. And I'm going to let that fire hydrant guy pass by. Got all types of hotel noises, so be right back. So I thought we would go ahead and work with some color now. And the color palette is located down here. And if you notice, I can add colors to it, possible colors that is. Notice that when I have a design on the screen, if the color is in the design, there's going to be a little blue square in the upper right hand corner. Also appreciate that this color chip here stands apart from the other color chips, and this color chip is the active color chip. One of the things I like about Bernina is if I wanted to, I could come into the design. I'm just going to use my scroll wheel, and I could go over to this, I'm going to call this a pick tool or an eyedropper tool, and I can come over here and click on this purpley color. And what I just did is I showed in my active color now what color this was digitized at, which was color number 2, and if I hover over it, it is Isochord 3241. Notice that once I've picked my eyedropper tool, this tool, which is kind of a fill or apply current color tool, becomes instantly active because the two work together. I picked a color in order to do something with it. So what I can do is I can come in here and say I'm hovering over this part of the design here, and when I click on it, I have now changed that object to the same color as this is. Let me come over here and do the same thing on this side. So already I've changed up the design by just using colors that are already in this palette. You know, another thing that you can do, which is kind of interesting, is I can come over and let me press the escape to drop that tool, so I just have my arrow. I can come down here to what's called the color wheel. And when I click on the color wheel, what that allows me to do is take these prongs. Each of these dots represents a color in this design. And I can take this in essence, and as I turn this, you're going to see how the colors in the design here change. And if I took one specific color, like say this purple color here, I can make it darker or lighter simply by dragging these spokes out along the color wheel. I can even take this purple and say make this go into the green area. Overall, I can now change the values of all of the colors, and I can make them darker or lighter. Now I'm going to make them darker and then click OK, and we'll see how radically that has changed all of the colors. The thing that I thought was pretty cool is, again, the blue squares represent the colors that are in the design. These were some of the original colors that were in the design, but do you see how they're still selectable, they're still available? I took a design that had 8 colors in essence and created additional colors with just a click of 1 or 2 buttons. Now, to make this kind of interesting, let me just go ahead and undo that. So this is the original, almost the original. I had repainted. I'm going to bring it back to the original design. Here's the original design. I'm going to back out just a bit so we can all see. And I'm going to select this design, and I'm going to go ahead and do a copy and paste and move this new design up to the upper left-hand corner. And then I'm going to go ahead and go Control D. Same difference, grab hold here, bring this down. So now I have 3 copies of the same design. They're all kind of in the same orientation, so I could take this design, click on it a second time in order to get this clear handle. So now I can rotate it, click on it once again to turn the handle solid, go into the corner handle and make it smaller. So now I'm changing the scale of the design. I can take this butterfly, bring it down a little bit here, and now I'm going to come up here and rotate this particular design 28 degrees, just like so. Why 28 degrees? Oh, why not? And this last one, I'm going to take him and I'm going to turn him upside down, yes, and I'm also going to rotate him 45 degrees. So now and probably also rescale him a bit too. So let's take him and I'm going to make him, proportional lock is locked, so it'll be proportional change. Make him, let's just say 60% of what the original was. So now I've got these 3 butterflies where I had just one. I'm just going to position them around so they kind of look fun. I like that design. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the middle butterfly, go back to my color wheel, do the same thing I had done before, but now take note of the middle one. The middle one is changing, the other 2 are staying the same. And I'm just going to leave him just like that. I'm going to say OK. So only this one has changed, these 2 are the same. And so now I've changed proportion, I changed rotation, I changed the colors of this. Wait, it gets better. So what I can do next is I'm just going to deselect, and I've got this, which means cycle the used colors. And just look up here as I click this. It's kind of like rolling dice. Each time I click, the colors that are in here just keep changing. And you'll find something that just goes, oh, I just love that. And I think it happened just about, it's getting better just now. Oh my gosh, I love that. So what I can do now is I could save this design, and I've created something much different. Just as an aside, you might take note of the fact that when I'm working with these designs, they're all isochore colors, and not that you can you have to use only isochore colors by any means, absolutely not. You can actually use several different thread palettes, such as I'm having isochore, but you also can use, say, Floriani or Madeira. You could use Robinson Anton and Sulky. All of these colors are in here, and you can actually use multiple different formats or colorways as well. So you're not confined to just one color chart. I'm going to go ahead and click off of this number here, which is 1311, just so that we can see all the possible colors. And as you can see, it's like these are all kind of tropical pinky type colors. Let's say I was looking for bluey type colors. I could go down into the bluey section here, and now I've got the bluey section. And if I wanted to, I could absolutely come in here and say, I've got this color 9. I'm going to make that the active color. We can see that's the active color, color 9. And if I come in here and say, I want to get into my my blues again, and let's just say this 4101 floats my boat. If I double click on that, that color 9 has now been updated to show color 4101. If I wanted to, and I'm going to do this just because we can, let me go to this 3130, which is this purpley color. So that's selected. That is the active color. And now I can come up here and say I want to look at Floriani as a thread palette. And we'll go ahead and duck out isochore for the time being. And I'm going to say OK. And say with this particular color, I want to make this pink Floriani color. And when I double click, that has now happened. So I have isochore colors on the same color palette as Floriani. If, say, I knew a particular color, like I had it in my hand, but I can't find it on this color chart easily, I can simply type in the number, say 4613, and that will give me that particular color. And if I double click on it, that will update. So I can add colors what I want pretty much instantaneously. If I wanted to add colors to this palette, I simply click on the plus button, and that's giving me additional colors to work with, which I can define how I want. If I want to hide the colors that I'm not currently using, I can simply click here. It will hide the unused ones. And if I want to see them again, because now I want to use additional colors, I click on that same icon a subsequent time, and they are there for me. If I want to delete the colors that I'm not using, I simply click on the delete, and now they're not hidden, they are just simply deleted. So we're going to start by working with one of the toolboxes, which is the grading toolbox, otherwise known as digitizing. And we're going to start off with something very simple, straight line. This is an open object. Good thing to get into a habit of is make sure you select the type of object you want to create, open, the type of outline stitch you want to use. Notice that I can't use fills with an open object. Hard to fill a bucket with a hole in it. And also appreciate that it would be a good idea to go ahead and select an active color. Currently the active color is 6. I'm okay with that, but because we can, I'll just go ahead and change it to 4, so that is the active color. So I'm going to be creating an outline stitch in this particular color, open object. A straight line is simply 2 points, which is a left click and a left click, and when I hit enter, this is the line. I know that you're excited, I am too. So I'm going to go ahead and select that object. The object is selected. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I might want to know the properties of that object. Nice way to find out is if I right click on the object type, which brings me my settings, I can see that the stitch length is 2. Now, if I wanted to, and I do, I could see what kind of points make up this object. And by clicking on the reshape tool, I will see that there are 2 left clicks, and they are being depicted by this yellow little square at the end of either side of this line. The other thing that we do see here is we see a green diamond and a red X, and the red X is the end point. If I take this end point and bring it up to the start point, you'll see that the ending now switches the other way. So instead of stitching from left to right, this will stitch from right to left. It really depends on how you digitize things. Case in point, if I do it real quick, well, not really quick because we're not in a rush here, I'm going to do open object, and if I click, say, I'll right click to the right and go to my left and hit enter, versus going from my left and over to my right and hit enter. And then we'll take a look at the properties on this. We'll see that this first one here, just as we saw, start here, end here, and the other one starts here, ends here. So that's how we can create a straight line. If we are interested in more than a straight line, that would be an additional point. So to create a triangle, I would just do a left click. First, let's go ahead and grab our open object tool. A left click, a left click, a left click. And because I can, I'm going to come right up here and click, and that is a triangle. I will say a triangle is a closed object. So one thing I might want to consider doing is going to a closed object tool, and the reason why I might elect to do that, let me just change the color to make it look a little different, is now if I left click, and hit enter, it closes itself up for me, which is nice. If I wanted to, I can also do the same triangle, but instead of a series of 3 left clicks, I can now do 3 right clicks. Listen to the computer when I make these clicks. You'll hear that it's a lower pitched sound. And when I hit enter, we can already see something's a little different, but when I hit enter, now we get a circle. So one of the take-homes here is in the Bernina software, if you do a left click, it's a higher pitched sound, and you are getting what's called a cusp node, which is a, in the editing thing, would be a yellow square. And if I right click, I'm going to be giving myself a smooth node or a cusp node, and that is a right click that allows me to do that. 3 left clicks will give me some type of triangle, and 3 right clicks will give me a circle. So let's go ahead and we're going to select everything, delete that off the screen. The other tools that I use very commonly are our ellipse and our rectangular tool. And so when I click on the ellipse, what I would like to do now is we're going to choose a different color. We'll make this color number 12. And instead of doing an outline stitch in a single stitch, let me do an outline in a satin stitch. And so to make a circle with using these automatic tools, I'm going to left click and drag. That sets the radius, and if I click one more time and hit enter, that gives me a perfect circle. If I did the same behavior, again, left click and drag, left click, but instead of hitting enter, if I drag a subsequent time, left click again and hit enter, now I get a oval or an ellipse. So a circle are 2 left clicks, hitting enter, and an oval is 2 left clicks followed by a 3rd click, hitting enter to give me that particular property. So next thing I want to show is going to be the rectangular tool. And we'll go ahead and select a color, and I'm going to go ahead and select this blanket stitch as an outline just to see something different other than a satin stitch or a straight stitch. I'm going to now select my tool, and you can see if I left click and drag how I can get a rectangle. Or if I hold down the control key and drag, still left click and dragging, I'm getting a square. I'm going to go ahead and keep this as a square. I'm going to go ahead and let go of the control key. When I hit the left mouse button the second time, that sets the object down. So zooming in here just a bit, we can see that we have a blanket stitch that is prepared around this perfect square. Talk about instant applique. I do love that about the software. If I wanted to further modify this, I can select the object, and then with it selected, if I right click on the object or right click on the properties here, I get the settings here. And I'm going to go ahead and define this as, say, having a 3mm width, and I'm going to go ahead and instead of saying offset of on the line, I'm going to go ahead and center that stitch across the line. And when I click apply, you can see that that has now updated. So here's the original line and it's now centered versus the offset and applying. See how that snugs in there. So nice, that's how you can create squares and rectangles and changing the spacing up on that, absolutely. If I wanted to, I can, let's back out of here a bit. This is still selected, and instead of having this as an outline, because a rectangle is a closed shape, I could certainly come in here and use like maybe one of these fancy fills. And I'm just going to left click, and you can see now that's kind of pretty, this fancy fill that I applied here. And if I right click on the fancy fill, this is going to open up a whole world of fun where I can take this the fancy fill and change it accordingly. So I might want to say make them little stars and click apply, and now we've got stars as a fill. So just a lovely, lovely, lovely way to create things pretty quick. So let's go ahead and delete this object from the screen, and we're going to talk a little bit about lettering. Now, depending on what the last lettering I selected when I used the software, if I left click, pay attention to what is down here in the lower left hand corner. That's where we get our clues. When I left clicked, you see how it says press mouse button to start text. So if I select the mouse button and then type in the word Bernina, that was a left click that I did, and hit enter, this was the last font, the size, the color that I had chosen. Now if I wanted a little more control over that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this object. I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of left clicking on the lettering, I'm going to right click. This opens up the object properties box where I can still type in the word Bernina, but now I can come in and say, instead of say that energy, let's go ahead and do a croissant and see how that looks like. And I'm going to click apply. It says press mouse button to start text, and I will go ahead and left click, and that is the croissant font. If I wanted to, because I clicked applied, that keeps this dialog box open, I could certainly come in here and select another type of font. How about Abby Script? And I could make this font maybe a little bit bigger. Let's make it 1 inch, and I can click apply, and now I have the updated font there. If I wanted to take the font and put it, say, on a different type of baseline, like this would be what they call hotel script or a vertical baseline, I can click on this. When I click apply, it is now changed accordingly here. So love the idea with the fonts. I've been using the embroidered fonts. I could certainly also use the true type fonts, and true type fonts are selected by scrolling down to, instead of the little red zigzag stitch here, those are digitized fonts. When I come down here and I get to these blue TT fonts, these are true type fonts. These little symbols are coming in a little small, and I'm sure Bernina will get feedback on that, and in a future update they will correct some of these little things that just need to be done. But this latest update certainly has made working on 4K monitors much, much easier, and I should say doable. So thank you so much, Bernina, for your last update of version 8.1. I'm going to go ahead and click on, just say, true types, and what this works out as is a filter. So when I click on the down arrow, now all I am seeing are my true type fonts to select from. And in my TrueType fonts, if I wanted to change by group, like I could say, show me all of the TrueType fonts. These would be all of the TrueType fonts that exist on my particular computer. Yours will be different. I could say, well, let me look at just the script TrueType fonts. And when I click on this, this will now show me just the ones that come off kind of like a script. And again, if I chose this, click apply, and maybe change the baseline back to a straight baseline, I can get that accordingly. So that's kind of cool. And just as an aside, if you wanted to put this on an arc, it's just a matter of clicking on your arc, clicking apply, and now you have your arc. And there are things we can do to change properties about this as far as how much of it curves, etc. And we will certainly get into that in club, as this is a fundamentals class. So stay tuned for that. So that's lettering in a nutshell. So I'm going to show you a general maintenance thing to do periodically. This is also something handy to do if you're finding your software is misbehaving, which sometimes it can. Of course, restarting the computer also helps. But it's called purging the backups in the software, because this software will continue kind of in the background to collect data on what you've been doing, and periodically it is important to go ahead and clear that buffer so that it can start with a clean slate. How you do that is you'll go into your Start menu and you'll navigate down to your programs where we have the Bernina embroidery software program. And when you click on that, you're going to see, amongst other things, this Purge Recovery. And when you click on that, that brings this dialog up, which is click on OK to purge the recovery directory. And we're also going to want to put a check mark on the delete backup files. And when you click OK, it'll say that the files have been successfully deleted. That clears my background, so the software will behave even better than it normally does. So what I'd like to do is show you the Applique tool. And when I show you the Applique tool, I could certainly freehand draw something and turn it into Applique, but what I'd rather do is get a image as a backdrop to use. And so to do that, I'm going to go over to the Artwork Canvas, and when I go into the Artwork Canvas, which is going to load up here, what I want to do is go ahead and select the Insert Artwork icon, which exists here, and I'm going to navigate to where I was the last time, which would be probably in my my pictures, and I can go ahead down and grab let's see, let me go into actually my desktop, and I'm going to navigate to my artwork file. Let's see where that might be. Artwork, it's up here, and double click on that to open that. And I'm going to go into my images, and let me just scroll down. Your images may exist in other places. As I'm looking for this, there's also, I'm just going to import. There's also something called Connect in Corel. We won't be going into a fundamentals class. The Connect icon is here, and that is where you can bring in images from online. I could certainly just left click on this and it would bring it in the size it originally came into, but what I tend to do is I will left click and hold, and as I drag, I'm going to actually create this object to be the size that I would like it to be. That's just another fire engine going by. Again, I did not do it. So I have the image here, and what I'm going to do is not convert this into embroidery. I'm just going to go back over to the embroidery canvas, and this will now open this up as a background. And it's interesting, in the color film, which is currently open, you'll see that this is a placeholder for the artwork. When I'm digitizing things, sometimes it's useful to dim the artwork, which is what this icon is for. And when you dim the artwork, it just allows me to see what I am creating here a little bit easier. I can also turn off the artwork, the bitmaps, by clicking this toggle. And this does the same thing for vector images. There are none on the screen, so it wouldn't have any effect. So I have the artwork dimmed, and I'm going to click over to the Applique tool, and you'll see that there is a hint that says enter point 1 on the boundary. Now, for my eye, these little nodes are a little too small, and I am going to put a shout out to Bernina. They did a great job with making this program more compatible for a 4K monitor, but if they could get these little nodes a little bit larger, it would be most appreciated. So as you can see, I'm going around with right clicks to create smooth nodes, left clicks in these angles to create cusp nodes, and I'm going to continue stitching around this little flower petal till I reach the beginning. As you can see, I'm not getting too concerned that I'm following exactly on the line. I consider backdrops to be just a hint of what the shape should be, and should not be the alpha and the omega of what the design should be, because I'm going to still get something that looks like a flower. So I've created 28 points. How do I know? Look at the lower left hand corner. When I hit enter, with one click, that creates the object for me. And as we can see over here in the color film, what is the object? It is a placement line, it is a tack down stitch, and it is absolutely a satin cover stitch. And what I can do is I can go to the slow redraw tool here. I can go ahead and hide the bitmap so I don't see that anymore. And you can see this stitching out. And I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up, maybe not that quick. Let me go to the beginning. Let me slow this down just a bit, once again to the beginning. So you see that I get a placement line. Once that placement line is stitched down, I would put my swatch of fabric, which would in this case be cut to that exact shape. And the next thing that you see is being stitched out now is a tack down. This is downing the raw edges of this applique shape. This first scenario, once again, is based on the fact that I have a piece of fabric that is cut to this shape, pre-cut. And then the last thing that you see is happening is it is now stitching down what is called a background or a compensating stitch for the satin. And let me just speed that up a little bit. And once it does that, then it puts down the satin stitch and things are well. Now, if I wanted to, I can absolutely come in here and look at the properties of this object by, again, the select tool and then double clicking on the object, another way to bring this up. And what you have here is you have the properties of this particular applique piece. This is the default properties. So we have a placement line, we have a spacing of 3 millimeters, and we have a width of the tack down at 2.6. We have a satin stitch that is a width of 3. The density is 0.4. This is very typical, very generic satin stitchy type of thing. Now I could put down a cutting line. Now what the cutting line is going to do, let me just go ahead and click apply. It's added a duplicate straight stitch, the initial thing here. And what this does for us, let me go back into our slow redraw. What it does, we're going to make this a slow redraw, buddy. Let's go back down here a bit, maybe not that slow. Something along the lines of this. And as we start from the beginning and play, it's going to give us the first tack down here. And I'm just going to go to the next color. It's going to give us another tack down, this time in green. What this has done, this is if I put a big square of fabric here, the first tack down is to show me where to put the square. The second cutting line, we're going to call this, is the same shape, but now I can take duckbill scissors and cut away the excess fabric from here. And then once that's done, now it's the same thing as far as the tack down, and then eventually the satin stitch will come down and you'll see that complete. So that's how easy applique can be in software. There is a function called Advanced Applique in the Fundamentals class, which is what this is. We will not be covering that. So other digitizing tools that are very useful are your freehand tools. And just like we have open and closed objects based on making nodes, left and right clicks. These are also open and closed objects based on left clicking and dragging, creating a shape. So I have the flower still on the screen, and the first thing I'm going to create is a closed shape, freehand wise. So what I have here is the ability to smooth, makes things a little smoother than what I initially set down, because my hand using a mouse is not as accurate as, say, if I was using a pen tablet. Wacom, W-A-C-O-M, is a company that's well known for their pen tablets, and that would help out with this process. But there'll be no judgment here, and I'm just going to kind of trace around this with a left click and a drag. And as I do this, I am going to create something that, if you squint, will look kind of sort of like this flower. But again, instead of doing all of these left and right clicks, I'm simply eyeballing this and taking this around. And when I get to the end and hit enter, I have my shape, and it's actually not too bad. That's not too bad. If I wanted to, I certainly could go ahead and select my shape and go into reshape nodes, and you can see I've got some of these nodes here that if I simply come in here and delete them and move them around, I can select multiple nodes at a time and pull that in. You can see how I can very quickly reshape what I've done to better conform to the image. Again, the image is not going to be seen, so people won't know if you're not exactly on track, but that's generally how you can create a shape pretty darn quickly, and I like that about the software, absolutely. Now, once I have this this shape created, deleting a couple of these nodes, nice. Let me go ahead and hide the background and go ahead and just see this for real. So I've got this as an outline closed object, but I could certainly turn this into a filled closed object. Speaking of filled closed objects, how about this? I can come over here and make this a stipple fill. Now, I know some of you quilters out there, your eyes got really big because you saw this and you're thinking, oh my, now you're finally speaking my language. If I wanted to change the properties of this, how could I do this? Certainly double click on that. That would bring up the object properties window. Again, another way you could do this is have it selected, come up to object properties here. And yet another way I could do this is right click on it, go to object properties. So many ways to get to the same spot. And so what I have here is the loop spacing. That's the distance between the loops. If I drag this over, I could say, instead of making that measurement, let me make this, let's just say 2 millimeters apart. And my stitch length, let's make that a little tighter at 2.2 millimeter stitch inches, and I'm going to go ahead and click apply, and you can see how, ooh, that's kind of nice. So I have that in a nutshell is how you can create a stipple fill out of a piece of artwork using the freehand draw tool. I certainly could, if I wanted to, select this object, and remember how we duplicate things? I could do Control D or just simply a copy and a paste. Now I have 2 copies of this. How do I know? They're both the same color, but if I click on Objects, here I have my artwork, and here I have my 2 objects that I created. The second one, rather than it being a stipple fill, let me go ahead and have that selected, and I'm going to make this a, how about a satin outline? Oh, yes. And so now I'm creating something that's kind of fun, and that would be nice on a project. I think you would agree. So that is freehand drawing tools in a nutshell. Again, if I was doing open freehand just for completeness, this is not going to be a closed shape, but I could do something like this is kind of a stipply type of meandering pattern. And I could certainly have a quilt block on my screen, and I could fill this up with these quilting types of stitches, and I hit enter. That has now created another pattern. So love that about the software. I'd like to go back to the embroidery library just to speak a little bit about the additional functionality that you have. We had spoke earlier how we can select a design and then open from selected versus new from selected. Remember, new from selected gives it a generic design name versus open from selected would give it its same catalog number there, and you just need to be careful that you do not save over the top of the artwork. You know, if you happen to do that, or you happen to lose designs, because things do happen, you can always recover the designs that originally came with the software, and you would do that by going through the initial installation.exe program, and you'll have the opportunity to do what they call a repair of program, and what that'll do is it'll just put the data back where it needs to be. So I don't want you to think that your life is over if accidents happen, and they happen to us all, of course. So a couple of things I do want to point out. Oftentimes when we are dealing with designs, I might have created something and I'm going to be putting it in a folder that has some meaning to me. And what I oftentimes do with my people that come to my classes, I talk about putting a file on their desktop called Embroidery Hold. Embroidery Hold. And it's a nice way of finding things quickly in other windows. When you're doing a file open, the desktop is oftentimes a location on the left-hand side of the search screen. And so to find the desktop and then to find Embroidery Hold, a lot easier to find designs. And what I did is I pointed this library that lives inside Bernina V8 software so that it could see where this desktop was, this folder on the desktop. And how I did that was by going to this function called Add Folder Library. And when you click on this, it will bring you up a dialog where a window will come up like this. And this should be very familiar if you've done any work on Windows computers. This is your Explorer window in essence. And so I can just navigate to my my desktop, and in my desktop I can go ahead and find this Embroidery Hold file. And then when I say add to library, or I already did, so I'm not going to do it again, but when I say add to library, what happens is it now is displayed here in the library. And every time you open up your computer, the library will be there for future use. These are some prior projects we've done in Club. And as you can see, I have subfolders in this for various and sundry purposes, these projects and things of that nature. So it's just another way of organizing, and I think that's a key. Being organized, it just helps take a lot, keeps your energy where it should be, and that is in creating things versus using energy to find things. I could absolutely take this Embroidery Hold file that I had added, and I could also remove it. Now mind you, it does not remove it from the original location. It still exists on my desktop. It just removes it from the reference in our library, in our embroidery library that's inside V8. The other thing I do appreciate about the software is if I was looking for a specific design. Let me just go into, these are the designs that come with the software Bernina 8, these different categories. Let me just click on, let's not do that, we'll say no. And I'm going to go decorative accents. And let's just say I am looking for a specific design, and it's going to be called purple motif, perhaps. And you can see that everything that has purple motif will come up. So this is a way of filtering information. Notice that with our Bernina designs, they'll oftentimes be things like, oh gosh, HT119 for instance, or BE1009017. If it is something like lace flowers, for instance, if I was up here and I typed in lace, then what happens is everything that has kind of a lace reference to it will come up. So that's one way to find designs that are in a larger category. If you have the prior name, you can go into the find field. Notice also that what is showing now are what they call all-in-one designs, which are things like your EMB, your art, and your Jan files. You could also search by all machine files, all embroidery files, or specific folders or specific files. So it's important that if you have, say, just Bernina all-in-one, like Art 8, if your file that you're looking for is, say, a PES design, it may not see it because you've already filtered out the PES. You're just looking at now Art 8 files. So if that's the case, I would say make the category like all embroidery files, so it'll see everything that's in that location. So again, it's just a way of filtering things. You know, if I took a design like, say, this guy here, this little scroll, and we can see again information that's on the right-hand side, I could take this design and I could convert it to another format. Because an Art 8 file cannot be stitched out. Again, that is a editing file. It's what's used in the software to create things. Remember, we're going to export designs for the machine, and that's when you would save it as, say, a VP3, an HUS, a PES, etc. And so convert selected designs. What I get here now is a dialog where I can browse for the location, where I'm going to save these things, and I'll be right back. So once I find a location for where I'm going to save the designs, all I need to do is hit OK, or I can even make a new folder in that location. That'll populate up here. And then what you'll do is you'll select the file types, and it could be more than one type. And when you hit convert, that design will be converted into those two formats in the location that you specified. That's great. When you're looking at designs, you can also sort the designs based on properties such as, let's just do the drop down, like number of colors, the number of stitches, the size of the design, etc. So say, for instance, I needed to do something quick and I didn't have a lot of time. I might do things by number of stitches in a descending order. So what you're seeing here now is this is the maximum number of stitches in this category, and this would be, it looks like 49,000 stitches versus the last one, which was 102 stitches. So it sorts it based on what parameter you set up here and if it's ascending or descending. So I like that as well. You could absolutely come in here and print up what's called a catalog. Unfortunately, I don't have a printer connected, but in essence what that is I can hold down the control key and select several different designs, and then when I go over print selected to catalog, I get this dialog where it says the catalog format. Do you want it as thumbnails, or do you want a thumbnail and a summary sheet such as this? And it will print all of those up. Why do you do this? It's if you have, say, a client that might be interested in several designs, and you can print those things up for them for future reference, which is nice. So again, this is a lovely feature of the software, and it does make getting designs in and out, converting them, sorting them so much easier. So let's have some more fun with designs. I have a relatively simple design on the screen, and what I'd like to show you is the toolbox called Mirror Merge. Notice that when I select Mirror Merge, everything is grayed out, and it's because even though there's a design on the screen, it's not selected. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the design. You'll see the selection handles around it, and once again, color film, if it's open, will have blue backgrounds on anything that is selected. And I want to make sure everything is selected, and the other way I could do that, the keyboard shortcut, is again Control A as in alphabet. So I'm going to go first and show this Mirror Merge horizontal, and when I do this, you'll see that there is a line, and as the line approaches one side or the other, you're going to see how the silhouette or this ghost image of the copy is kind of coming into view. And I could make this any distance I want. I'm going to actually have these guys kind of touch. And when I click on that, that will make the copy, and you can see how I'm now building kind of a frame, which is nice. I'll go ahead and undo that, and in this case we'll go ahead and now select the design, and I'm going to, instead of just do mirror merge vertical, which would just be what you would expect, let's do mirror merge horizontal and vertical. And so as we see this, can you appreciate that I can kind of build kind of a nice complicated frame by making sure like these guys touch and these guys are in like so, and then when I click I get something along the lines of that, and boy, could you just see a monogram right there. So I love the mirror merge tools. There's also in the screen something called wreath, and when I click on wreath, it depends on how many rows and columns and also the number of copies that I choose. It will change the way these guys are depicted here. So I'm going to put in, I oftentimes will use an odd number, like let's just use 9. And as you can see, I'm going to zoom out just a bit. As you can see, as I zoom out and I bring these in, I can kind of play with the position till I get something I think I might like. I will click on that, and now I've made a very, very complicated design out of a relatively simple element by simply using these mirror merge tools. And so I think you're going to enjoy that as well. It is a lot of fun. So we're going to work a little bit with the art canvas of the program, and if I come up here to the upper left hand corner, I should say, this will open up, and this is Corel SE currently. This is the latest update, and you'll see a lot of these tools look very, very familiar. One of the things I want to point out is, do you see how some of these icons have these little black triangles next to them? This is an important thing to remember, because my column might look different than your column because it depends on the last tool that you had selected. And what I mean by that is, if I left click and hold onto the icon, you'll see this fly out menu where I can select another tool. And so as you can see, instead of the spiral, now you see a square here. What I'd like to do is draw a couple of vector shapes. Everything we draw in Corel are vectors, and so I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag, and you can see, just like with the embroidery canvas, I can make a rectangle of any dimension. And then I'm going to also now make a square, and so how I make a square is I'm going to hold down the control key and draw. And because I can, I'm going to come in now and make a circle. And I make a circle by, again, holding down the control key and drawing out. And then lastly, I'm going to make an oval. And how we make an oval in Corel is a little different than in the embroidery side of the canvas, because I'm not clicking the nodes, I'm just dragging to the node point. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to say what I'm doing. I'm left clicking and holding, I'm drawing straight down, and then I'm kind of like making an L. I'm going off to the right, and I'm visually looking at the outline that's being created, and when I let go, that has created the shape. Now, if you look down below here, you're going to see there are two different colors that we can have in any given vector. We can have a fill color, and we can have an outline color. Currently, the software defaults to always create outlines of a thickness of 0.2 millimeters. I could make the outline thicker by either pre-selecting it before drawing, or after drawing, having the object selected, clicking on this down arrow, and now defining what thickness I want the line to be. Furthermore, I could take that line and change the color. So if I come over here to where my color chips are, it is a matter of simply right-clicking on the color chip, and you'll see that color has been updated here as well as here, and any subsequent objects that I would draw would be of that colored outline with no fill. If I wanted to make this object have a fill color, it would just be a matter of coming over here, and instead of doing a right click, it is a matter of a left click. Left click will give me my fill color, and you see that the object has been updated here as well. Again, the siren's in the background. I did not do it. It is a happening day here in Harrisburg. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you by selecting another object. Let's just select the square up here. What I can do, if I wanted a different color other than what is obviously here, I could say for a fill, it would be a matter of left clicking and holding until this fly out menu comes out. Then you can let go of the mouse button, and now I could take any of these changes in value for this hue, and let's say this lighter color here. Oh, I hope they get that person. Maybe it's the fire truck. This is exciting. But keep going, go down the road. So as you can see, I now have a different color of that object. So the thing that I appreciate about the software, and just because I can, I'm going to make the outline here a little thicker, and I'm going to make it a different color with a right click. Oh, let's make it something more obvious, a right click. So I have in essence 4 vector shapes. They all have outlines. Some of them do not have fills. Others have both fills and outlines, different thicknesses. Notice I'm going to take this particular object and I'm going to go ahead and select it because I have my select tool highlighted. The handles are around. I can still resize this just like I could anything in Embroidery Canvas. If I click on it and a second time, I get these curved handles as opposed to the open handles that we see in embroidery side of the software. And I can take this and I can rotate it. I could also double click. This is the axle. I can bring this down to here, and now I'm rotating this on this axis. This type of functionality is the exact same thing we see in Embroidery Canvas. The exact same thing, so keep that in mind. Once again, I have this object selected, and I could certainly come over and do a reshape, which is this guy here, and then I have what nodes exist to change what's happening with the object, if I so chose that. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Select the object once again. This object selected, the others are not. So as I do convert, I want you to keep in mind that only objects that are selected are turned into stitches. And so we can see this object is indeed stitches because they appear in the color film, and down below we see it's 5,195 stitches. Anything that is converted to a vector is generally a step fill, and it's generally step fill number 1 with a stitch angle of 45 degrees. I can change that, however, and that again is just by clicking on the reshape tool, and I could change the angle of the stitching just by simply going like this. I could also change this fill type. I could make it a fill type, or let's just do something a little different, like maybe a sculptured fancy fill, and that's kind of pretty. And I could also take the outline of the stitch. Here's my outline, and I could change that to say, let's make that a satin stitch a little thicker. So I can manipulate the stitches once that is completed or brought in, converted. So a question might be, okay, well, these objects, these are the vector images that weren't selected when I did the convert function. I can't select these, right? They're on the background, but they're not selectable. I can see them, but I can't select. If I didn't want to see them, just like we saw before, I can hide a bitmap or I can hide a vector, and when I click on hide a vector here, you'll see those go away. They're still there, they're just hidden. So why would we have a vector shape on the screen that I could not select? It's oftentimes due to the fact that I like to use these for backdrops for creating objects, and we saw this earlier when we did the applique. I could certainly show that once again. It's quick enough. So I click on the applique, I get enter point 1 on the boundary. It's simply a matter of clicking here, 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 here. Because it's an applique, it knows it's a closed object, so I can hit enter. That finishes the object. And we'll see in our color film that true enough, it's created the placement line, the tack down, and the cover stitch. So that's kind of nice how easy that is to be done.